Christians have a way of dying disproportionately in these wars, which tells you something about their real motive. But in any case, there was a spate of stories suggesting that U.S. commanders told their troops they were doing this for some weird anti-Christian reason posing as Christianity. But it's not just the U.S. side. Here's an IDF soldier, apparently an American by his accent, describing why he's at war. Watch this.
They call this operation the Swords of Iron. But what are we really fighting for? We're fighting for the right of the Jewish people to exist, be Jewish, practice their religion, and be free. And one day our true leader will come and we'll be united as a whole Jewish nation so we can rebuild the Beit HaMikdash.
Beit HaMikdash, probably mispronouncing it. That's the Hebrew term for the temple, the third temple. We are doing this so we can rebuild the temple. Now you'll notice he's pulling off patches on Velcro on his IDF uniform. These are not civilian clothes. This is the uniform of the government of Israel, of its military. And he has patches on that uniform, one of which is a symbol of the temple, the third temple. So it just couldn't be clearer. Why are we doing this? To rebuild the third temple. Now, if you think we're just cherry picking this off the internet, one guy wearing an unauthorized temple patch, paid for, by the way, a uniform paid by us, armaments paid for by us, the U.S. taxpayer pays for all this stuff one way or another. The U.S. taxpayer pays for the military of Israel. Boy, does it. If you think we're being unfair and just like found one guy, well, here's a bunch of guys. It took us about 2 minutes on the internet to find this today. Here is a selection of IDF soldiers. Let's put it on the screen. There you go. And all of them have the same patch. Look familiar. Look carefully at that. What is that? That's the temple. That is the third temple. Now we'll get to in a minute about how this might actually happen and what it would mean for the rest of the world. And just to be clear, these are conversations that most Americans, certainly me included, never wanted to have. Everybody's religious beliefs, sincere religious beliefs, when held up to the light of the rational world, to the man-made world, seem a little spooky and crazy, which is one of the reasons that in the culture some of us grew up in, we don't talk about them in public because they're personal. They're the most personal part of a person. So it is without judgment, by the way, that we're airing this, okay? Just describing it because it is significant to the future of the world, to the future of this war, and to our future as Americans. So how exactly did the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, a military that the U.S. taxpayer pays for, that lots of wealthy Americans send money to friends of the IDF, how did all these guys wind up wearing patches suggesting the point of this war was the destruction of one of the holiest places in Islam and the rebuilding of a temple that is totally anathema to Christianity? Like, how did this happen? Well, there are a lot of ways it happened. The main way it happened is because no one in the United States noticed, because it's such a secular place, and as noted, we have eyes but can't see and ears and can't hear, but this has been going on a long time in public through, in part, the efforts of a group called Chabad, Chabad. And you may know people who give money to Chabad or run Chabad, super nice people, engaged in all kinds of charitable activities, drug rehab. You know, there's a lot about Chabad that's really good. But what is Chabad exactly? Well, Chabad, you can look it up, is a very old organization, about 250 years old. And it's a branch of Hasidic Judaism. It's an organization that was overseen for many years by a guy called Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who was famously in Brooklyn, considered the Messiah by some of his followers, who was a friend of presidents, or certainly someone presidents visited. He was a very powerful man in the Orthodox and the Hasidic community. And he was the overseer of Chabad, which predated him and outlasted him, but he was its most visible ambassador. And Chabad has been pushing in a pretty subtle way, unless you look carefully, for the reconstruction of the third temple. And it seems like, from the reading we did recently, that those patches actually came from Chabad. In any case, Chabad is pushing for the building of the third temple. But it's not just Hasidic groups from Brooklyn, and it's not just IDF soldiers. there are amazingly a lot of American evangelical leaders, Christian Zionists, whose main point is rebuilding the third temple. Now, how could an American Christian or any Christian call for the building of a temple whose inherent presence denies Christ? Who said clearly, and Christians believe this, it's a core point of faith, I am the temple. You want to speak to God, you speak through me. That's Christianity. That's the whole religion right there. So if you're a Christian preacher calling for the rebuilding of the third temple, you kind of missed the whole point. That's more than apostasy. That's like not even knowing what the religion's about. So it's hard to believe there could be any ordained Christian leaders pushing for the rebuilding of the third temple. Oh, but there are a lot. There are a lot. And here's just one. This is Pastor Greg Locke. Listen to this.
The Gaza Strip, which has now been cut off by Israel, and rightly so. They should have cut them off a long time ago. Now, I don't care how insensitive you think I am to that. There's 6 doors in this church. You can leave anytime you want to. They've cut them off, electricity. They've cut off the water. They should have. Now, listen, I'm not for hurting anyone that's innocent. But anybody that supports terrorism is not innocent. Do you understand that? Israel should make the Gaza Strip a parking lot by this time next week. Destroy the whole thing. What they ought to do is evacuate up there on the hill and get a great big missile and blow that wicked dome of the rock plumb off of the spot where it's standing right now, so we can get that third temple rebuilt and usher in the coming of Jesus.
You've earned your success. You worked hard. You deserve.
Boy, it is embarrassing and shameful as an American Christian to hear that and to know that video is from a few years ago. It's been on the internet. No one bothered to highlight it. Most people weren't even aware this was going on. Oh, it's definitely going on. These are very common views. Seems obvious that Mike Huckabee has them, that a lot of the Christian Zionists, John Hagee, that you think just like Israel. They just like Israel a lot. No. These are clerics, so their lives are informed by their religious views. What are their religious views? Well, you just heard it right there from Pastor Locke, who's quite a prominent Christian Zionist. He's not some lone wacko. And there he is with an Israeli flag waving behind him. Casual calls for genocidal violence. Just blow it up. Make it a parking lot. Well, 2 million people live there. What happens to them? They're terrorist sympathizers. That right there is the tell. This is not Christianity. Imagine